my name is Ashkan Karbas-Rushan. I'm the CEO of WatchMojo.com. WatchMojo.com is a producer of premium video content. We cover the people, places, and trends that you care about. We have a catalog of about 7,000 videos, and we've generated nearly 1 billion views since 2006. So I'm very happy to have the following three gentlemen. So Justin Fadgen, you are with Grab Media.
That's right.
So I'm going to let you explain what you do and what Grab does as well. Jason Glickman, formerly of Tremor Media, the #1 ad network, video ad network online, currently with Connected Sports Ventures. Tell us a little bit about that. And Mike Gordon, Chief Strategy Officer of Frequency. So start off just with the tweet version of what you do currently and the company.
Okay, my name is Justin Fadgen. I run the publisher network at Grab Media. Grab Media is a distributed media company. We license content from media companies like Yahoo, WatchMojo.com, NBC Universal, and we syndicate that short-form content to a large network of publishers all across the web. We reach 25 million unique visitors in the U.S. and 150 million content streams per month.
I'm Jason Glickman, CEO of Connected Sports Ventures, and we are still in stealth mode, but what we're building is basically second screen applications that enhance a live sports broadcast. That's about the most I could say right now. Essentially, we allow you to, the sound bites are experience a game via a second screen as if you're in a bar or in a stadium, and we turn the sports game into a video game. I'm also currently the chairman of Tremor Video and co-founder.
And I'm Mike Gordon. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Frequency. Frequency is a personal video aggregation service. If you need a 3-word elevator speech, it's Pulse meets Netflix. We collect all the video you're interested in from around the net and bring it to you in a consistent, intelligent, intuitive interface on any device that you're interested in watching it on. Prior to Frequency, I was one of the founders of Limelight Networks. Some of you may have, I've been speaking at this event, at this conference for many years, so some of you may have seen me in those days.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's get started. This panel is largely about, the question is, will Internet TV accelerate online video's growth or keep television stronger than ever? So a few years ago, we talked a lot about mobile, and there was a lot of hype around all things wireless. And now we're seeing that it's actually starting to pick up steam and whatnot. And I would say OTT, over-the-top connected devices, it's where mobile was a few years ago. So tell us a little bit about, do you agree that the potential will one day of OTT be met, or do you actually think that it's still small and will remain small for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think it's there's a couple of things happening in the market right now. Consumer behavior is really changing and embracing OTT. So, and there's obviously the way that some of the cable distribution companies that are reacting, playing both offense and defense, trying to protect their business models from the threat of OTT is evidence that that's very real. A couple things that are happening. One thing is live television viewing has been declining quarter over quarter for 14 quarters. So clearly there's a consumer shift in terms of how consumers are interacting with live TV content. So a lot of that's due to DVR, but a lot of that's increasingly due to OTT. You also see that there's cable subscriber growth for video has been relatively steady over the past couple of quarters, but it's starting to decline. Part of that is because of the maturity of the infrastructure build out. There's only so many homes passed that these guys can penetrate. But the bigger issue is there's an emergence of the consumer, who knows nothing but the internet. The lost generation from a cable perspective, that it's not an issue of cutting the cord, it's an issue of they never had the cord to start with. Their first television experience is going to be maybe rabbit ears to get their live television over HD, and then an $8 subscription to Netflix. So from that perspective, it's a very real phenomenon. And I think particularly that lost generation is the biggest concern for the TV industry.
Yeah, I think OTT can be described in a number of ways. There's some versions of OTT that are doing really well, right? So Microsoft Xbox 360 has 25 or maybe 30 million people. The version of OTT that a lot of people talk about, the single application smart TV, I think is still in its infancy stage. And I think it can be big down the road, but it'll take some time. And right now, I think most of that use is happening with like Netflix is kind of the premier use. I think once we see applications that come onto those devices that enhance the experience and are more diverse, I think we'll see those things begin to take off. And the other thing is that those devices need to really up their game on being true to a smart TV and increase the processing power and really increase the ability for it to become a real app platform. Until that happens, it'll sort of stay as sort of a niche type of experience. Yeah. But I think it'll come. It just will happen slower than I think a lot of pundits may predict.
I pretty much agree with what Jason said, but I'd make one observation, which is I think it'll happen faster than pundits predict. And the reason why I think that is that I think we're at the doorstep of an autocatalytic period where the arrival of television, what we think of as television content on tablet and mobile devices, teaches consumers for whom that is their first device, particularly the smartphone, what is available in the video universe, and that then feeds back into their expectations from television sets. The primary gating factor, I believe today, in terms of smart TV adoption by consumers is the habit is not to select HDMI port 6 or the smart hub. You know, the habit is not to go to some other device like your Blu-ray player that can take you to an internet connection or go to the internet portal on the TV. The habit is just turn it on and watch what's on television. And as consumers using their smartphones and tablets become much more acquainted with all the things that are available to them via the internet, they will bring those expectations for the first time to their television sets. And I believe that will drive a tremendous amount of increase in the use of television sets to watch video, both what we think of as television content, but also all of the other video that's not today considered television content that is available to them and increasingly is coming to the world of devices that they use to watch.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I think, with those devices, I think important is the onboarding. I think a lot of people have connected TVs, smart TVs, but they may not even realize it, right? And so how can they educate users that this is here and here's where you go to it? I think the other big problem is that the way to access them for the most part right now is through a remote control from the TV device, which is clunky, and I actually don't even know where mine is, to be honest with you. I think as that begins to transition, you see the remote become the tablet or the remote become the phone, then it becomes more of a seamless experience. But right now, trying to type anything, even some of the slide-out QWERTY keyboard remotes from the TVs is mind-numbing. And so that will begin to change. We're seeing it. Samsung has a version of their remote which is downloadable on the iPhone and on Android. And I think we'll see that begin to change. But until that becomes mainstream, people are aware and it's easy to use, I think that's a gating factor. But it'll happen. I don't know when. I think mobile for a long time was it's coming, and they said it for 10 years, and it is here now. But it took a lot longer to finally arrive.
The other thing that I think we have to be cognizant of too is the rate of adoption will vary by generation. So as Justin was saying, we do have a younger generation that their first experience with video is not on their television sets, or certainly their first independent experience from their homes. I think it's also important to note that that generation is much more of a settings-centric generation than our parents were. So, you'll all recall the joke from 20 years ago where the VCR was blinking 12 all the time. For a 22-year-old, there's no equivalent phenomenon. They can configure their smartphone, they can control apps, most of them, well, not most of them, but a surprisingly high percentage of them understand Facebook off really well. And this is a generation who will hurdle over a slightly higher technical bar. I do agree with Jason, though, on the onboarding process has to get better. I'm just questioning, does it have to get so good that my grandma can onboard that thing, or does it have to get just a little better? And then our settings-centric consumers that exist today and who share their knowledge with their friends and neighbors will get us over that bar, and we'll see adoption accelerate.
I think that, sorry, just to finish the point, I think that it's great. It will get to a point where your grandma can operate it, but it'll probably take Apple to do that.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Right. Okay, so I want to touch on Apple because everybody's sort of expecting Apple to come and have their fourth hit in fourth market and whatnot. But let's just first go back to the economics. TV last year, despite all of the doomsday scenarios, crossed $70 billion in terms of U.S. advertising for the first time ever. Meanwhile, despite the fact that we were expecting online video to cross, I believe, $2 billion in the U.S., I think in the end it was about $1.8 billion, so not even what we were hoping for. And those numbers are just staggering. It's 35 times larger still in TV. Why?
I mean, from the online video perspective, a lot of it is just the volume, right? So you can only sell what you have. and there's a ton more volume on TV. So there's the fact that there's more volume is also the fact that the sellout rate is not what it could or should be in online video yet. But I mean, there's just so much more consumption of TV content than there is of online video content now. I think that begins to change really quickly. Partly because
there's also, by the way, the ad load is just very different on television than it is online.
Yep.
So if you're selling, 12 ad avails in 30 minutes on television and one, and it's a 15-second, well, so if it's a 4-minute clip's 6 of them, but you see the point.
Yep. So I think it starts to change. I think probably it's driven by just this shift of user behavior from sort of a linear mode of viewing to an on-demand mode of viewing, and that I think is now beginning to change. People are expecting to watch content when and where they want to watch it versus waiting for it to come on. And I think that's now moving into the older demographics as well. So I think the younger demos have been doing that for a while, but that's when it starts beginning to catch on, when we see that sort of time-shifted viewing really take off. And it is now, right?
Except for sports, Mr. Whitman.
Yeah, I think sports is the one area, maybe the Oscars and some new stuff too, that is virtually DVR-proof, not completely, but I think that we'll see the online video shift and sort of a redefinition of what online video actually is. I think that when you combine what people have traditionally called online video as sort of the laptop to an iPad or mobile, I think it all blends into one thing. I think it's more defined as the time-shifted viewing versus the TV viewing, which is what the networks and that 70 billion is made out of.
I do think, though, as we look out and we bring the Internet's strengths, which include things like targeting and personalization and dynamic trafficking in real time down to the individual ad served to this individual user in this individual context, to a much higher percentage of video. So these are things that Tremor does today in online video. They are things that could be very readily done in smart TV type video and certainly tablet delivered video very easily. And I think as we bring those strengths to more and more of the video that's consumed, you'll see this balance shift pretty quickly. Because the value to an advertiser of a well-chosen ad at this moment in time is just much greater than the same ad to all the people who happen to be watching.
So you touched on Apple, and you previously mentioned Xbox. So that's Microsoft, Apple. There's also Google making a lot of moves in terms of getting into the living room. Which company is best positioned to win the OTT battle, if you're going to think of one company?
I would say that my prediction, within a few years, OTT will look a lot like mobile, and I think there'll be probably 3 winners. And it'll be Android, it'll be iOS. I think Microsoft, just by the fact that they have so many users, has to be in there. There are others that will try. I think Samsung will make that's a possibility as well. But it won't be as sort of fractured and chaotic as it is now. So I think it'll align very closely. And I think it'll be driven by developers and content producers who want to align themselves with a platform.
Is Steve Ballmer going to come out and chant developers?
He might. And so I think that's where I think it'll go. But I think there'll be a lot of craziness before we end up there.
You should all search developers on YouTube to understand what I was referring to. Okay, so 69% of people who basically have tablets at the same time are on their tablet, whether it's iPad or whatever, and watching TV. What's the main takeaway from that? What's the main opportunity there? It's obviously, I'll let you guys actually chime in on.
The main takeaway is the television viewing day is actually 48 hours, not 24. I'm serious. People always say, television viewing it's got to become a zero-sum game. Actually, we're a long way from a zero-sum game.
So you actually do think it's not competitive, it doesn't suck away. You think it'll be accretive when it's all said and done?
Well, the question becomes, how do you know what the user's paying attention to? But everything we've seen so far suggests that aggregate video viewing continues to grow in the face of more choices, more devices, freer alternatives. And the pushback you get against that sometimes is, well, we're watching whatever the number is now, 9 hours a day. We can't watch more than 24. Well, we can if we're watching 2 devices at once. And again, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that there is a risk that we lose some consumer attention. On the other hand, that maybe turns into just another battle for consumer attention, another dimension in which there is noise that commercial messengers have to overcome. But for folks who are thinking about what is the size of the video universe in terms of sort of like, traditional metrics like viewer hours, it does appear that we have plenty of headroom left to fill.
Yeah, I mean, when you say second screen viewing, I actually think of that as sort of synchronous of an iPad or tablet or phone as they're watching TV. I think, to me, that applies to like additional content around the TV program. I think we're talking about video content. If the TV happens to be on and they're watching video content on their iPad, then that iPad becomes the first screen, right? So to me, I make that distinction. I'll put that in that category. But for second screen sort of multitasking, the numbers are pretty interesting, right? So 85% of people do that on a monthly basis. 50% of people do that, either use an iPad or another tablet or a phone as they're watching TV, 50% on a daily basis. That's an interesting trend that I think will grow. And I think it'll follow sort of users getting information about what they're currently watching. I think that'll become more popular. Right now, a lot of that's baked in those numbers is people tabbing over and checking email or looking at Facebook, which may have to do with what they're watching on TV, but not as much. I think more and more they'll use this device as sort of an extended experience of what they're watching on TV.
Or Twitter.
Selfishly, I hope that happens. Right? So.
Or Twitter. I feel like if you're on your tablet or your iPhone while you're watching TV, there's a good chance that you actually might be following something on Twitter as well.
Yep, and a lot of these apps that are in existence, like GetGlue or others, are playing off of that. And Twitter is a main component of what they're exposing in chat as well. So I think that trend will continue. But I think that's very different than sort of the TV everywhere type mode or video that appears on a phone or on a tablet or even on a TV app.
But it is interesting to think about. I agree with everything you said, but it's interesting to think about just a sort of thought experiment. I don't know how many of you are users of the ESPN Watch Now app and watch ESPN as a channel on television. But if you are, think about how the way you watch SportsCenter, as a simple example, could change if Watch Now included video on demand, which today it doesn't, but it's inevitable that it will, probably sooner rather than later. So when I arrive at SportsCenter at 20 after the hour, and I have just missed an important story, I can catch it up on my iPad while I'm also paying attention to the current story. So I think that we underestimate, particularly for a younger generation that is very sort of multitasking already, I think we underestimate how useful the ability to watch a couple of different pieces of video, essentially simultaneously, definitely contemporaneously, is going to be, just like the way that, reading tweets and sending tweets and chatting on Facebook and doing all the things they do on sort of text-oriented second screen apps adds value to their broadcast experience. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds.
We've seen magazines like Newsweek and Businessweek being bought for practically nothing. And then yet you see an online magazine like TechCrunch get acquired for like $30 million, which is a nice payoff considering the amount of capital that went into it. Do you think that TV is going to be sheltered from that, or are we still going to see maybe disruption, and it might take longer, where you are going to see not just extreme cases like YouTube, but you're going to see these new media video companies emerging, being worth far more than what the traditional TV-centric media companies are going to be worth in 5 or 10 years? Or will we not see a repetition of print in the television world?
So we're all putting on our investment banker hat.
Yeah, no, that's right. Just where you see things going. Just a student of history, not just investment bank.
Well, there was a recent acquisition, Revision 3, was bought by Discovery Communications a week or two ago. And you might think that might have been an overreaction on behalf of Discovery, maybe an overly defensive move, realizing that if you're going to capture that lost generation, you've got to get the world's leading loss generation video network, which is what Vision 3 claims to be. So you're seeing some of that. But I think over time, though, the erosion of the traditional cable business model is going to happen very gradually. I think they're very smart. They're working very hard to offer their own complementary over-the-top services like Comcast with StreamPix, Verizon with their joint venture with Redbox. They'll offer alternatives to try to buttress their position and try to defend that very lucrative business model they have.
Yeah, and I think you kind of put YouTube in there. I think that is like just an outlier, a crazy outlier, just because how big they are, and obviously they're owned by Google. But I don't see anytime soon a video publisher being worth more than even the smallest cable network. And partly it's driven by just the raw number of people that are watching TV. But it also has to do with the content and how it's produced and everything that goes into that. So you said 5 years. I think it's probably longer than that. Then we'll see some kind of phenomenon happen like that outside of a YouTube, which I think by itself can be valued as one of those. But there's YouTube, and then there's like really everyone else, like YouTube at 1, and then everyone else starts at like 11, right? So.
Yeah.
So I think two comments. I think it is super important when we're talking about, I don't know what adjective to use, mainstream content, I guess. It's super important to not undervalue the work of creators, right? I mean, we're not all Steven Spielberg. We're not all Aaron Sorkin. And the meta creators, the organizations that are really good at finding the Shonda Rhimeses and the J.J. Abrams and the folks who are about to sort of begin their career arc through a series of fantastic creative projects, and they get them on the air with Grey's Anatomy or Firefly if you're Joss Whedon or whatever. So, or I guess Buffy was his first. But anyway, the point is, we can't undersell the importance of that. Just because the internet lets anybody send any piece of video to anybody else does not mean that we are all equally gifted when it comes to storytelling. And in
you're
fact,
hurting my feelings now, but okay. No, I'm kidding.
And in fact, the craft, not necessarily art, but the craft of creating great, well-produced video, it's just very, very difficult. Having said that, if you'll recall, over the last 10 years or so, the text and graphics web took a whole generation of starving writers and artists and moved them into the suburbs and called them web content producers. And we may see that happen with starving musicians and filmmakers. My second comment, though, is I'm not 100% sure I agree with you, Jason. And in terms of
what did I say?
In terms of that there will not be another YouTube, and the reason I say that is twofold. First of all, we may all be sitting here thinking Vidi's $30 million on 350 pre-round was a ridiculous moonshot. On the other hand, they seem to have done it well. They've done an excellent job of grabbing the everyone calls them Instagram for video. I think that undersells Vidi, but grabbing the opportunity to take all of us and turn us into content creators for our own little niche audience and distribute that content to each other in a Twitter-like, Facebook-like, social connected way. And I think that's an example of how the unlimited any-to-any connectivity of the internet, and frankly the unlimited human communication potential in all of us, and the desire to tell and hear stories that we all have as human beings, point the way towards the fact that there may be a whole slew of new business models that we can only begin to imagine right now that will be unleashed as all devices begin to access all video, and as the sort of traditional gatekeepers have to compete with less gate-kept content sources. So I don't mean to say WatchMojo, you're at a loss because you're not Steven Spielberg. There's just a whole different world out there that's the non-Steven Spielberg world, and we don't know what it looks like. And I just think it's a fascinating time to be alive and be in this business or be just a content consumer because so much great stuff is happening.
Yeah, and I would agree that there are opportunities. And I think it's changing the mind of the consumer, right, to shift that behavior.
Yep.
But I think just as importantly and probably more difficult is changing the mind of the advertiser.
Totally agree with that.
Away from exclusively valuing who's in the content, the fact that it's Ryan Seacrest versus Mario Van Peebles, right? And so I think that that will exist for a long time. I think you'll see advertisers paying more and opening up budgets for the Steven Spielbergs of the world versus the sort of the revision 3s of the world. But that will change, but it just takes longer to change that behavior just because it's safe and they know it. Now, eventually, like an overwhelming push from users saying this is what I want to consume and how I want to consume it will change that, but it'll take a while. And it won't be this year or next year for sure.
And the other thing that is almost certainly true, I'd be interested in both of your perspectives on, all three of your perspectives on this is...
And Mario Van Peebles' perspective.
And Mario Van Peebles. Well, but it does seem that it's incredibly likely that you have to be pure and you have to be exceptionally good. In other words, you can't be one of these sort of hodgepodgey sort of business plans or content models, or we're a little bit. We've seen this in broadcast, right? I mean, all the broadcast networks, all the cable networks are moving to more and more pure models of one kind or another. They stand for something specific that a user can latch onto or viewer can latch onto and say, okay, I know what Investigation ID is. Now I can watch it, and now it's the fastest growing channel on cable TV or whatever. So I think you have to be really pure about something, stand for something, means something, occupy a position in a viewer or consumer's mind. And I think you have to be really good at what you do. There's a huge difference between being Vidi and being the 9 companies. We don't know who they are, but I guarantee you there are 9 other folks that wanted to be Vidi.
Okay.
They just didn't execute like they did.
Hold on, time out. I don't want to bash any company, but Vidi basically and SocialCam, the reason why they had this massive growth is because they basically hijacked the Facebook timeline and Facebook's open graph. Where
That's not true.
No, allegedly then.
No, SocialCam did.
SocialCam.
That allegation against SocialCam does appear to be true with the YouTube videos they injected into their stream, but Vidi never did that. Vidi's content shared on Facebook appears to be entirely videos shot by people who use Vidi, not YouTube videos repurposed as this was watched on SocialCam, which I agree with you. That does appear to be, I don't know, but that does appear to be what SocialCam did. Now, let me just quickly interject something else. So
I own Vidi. No, I'm kidding.
No, I don't own any of Vidi. The knock you hear on Vidi, though, is that they did hijack the timeline. Every time you watch a video on Vidi, it goes in your timeline and all your friends see. But so did Washington Post Social Reader.
Okay.
So okay, I won't click on that link, but my 15-year-old clicks on that kind of stuff all the time. So
I want to go from the investment banking question to like the Dalai Lama question. Let's just put on our...
This will be interesting.
No, so the reason why Google kicked everybody's butt is because, everybody gave up on being the search, right? So everybody became portals, and Google stuck it out, and there was nobody investing in search, so that 25 million went a long way, and it was like the perfect storm. But I find that now you have basically the markets and venture capitalists and in the acquisition M&A market rewarding bad behavior. Do you agree or disagree with the fact that today, because you see Instagram go from an idea to a $1 billion exit, do you feel like this sort of fad-chasing, flip this company at any cost mindset, is it preventing from quality to be created and rise to the surface? Because it's really a lot of what's the latest fad. Like in the 6-7 years I've ran WatchMojo, I've seen every fad, link shorteners, location-based this, just things that you look back, you're like, I can't believe we thought this was going to be the next fill in the blanks, right? So do you agree with that, or do you think, no, this sort of like flip this company as fast as you could to the greater fool, the biggest sucker, is good, and that somehow is going to lead to quality products being created to please consumers?
I think quality products are being created right now. I think that there are certain cases, like potentially a SocialCam or others, that may try to trick the system, and they may raise a round of funding as a result of that. But that's rare, really rare, right? Eventually, it all sort of normalizes, and either Facebook corrects the timeline or Google fixes the algorithm, and it becomes what's like good for the user and what's a true positive experience, and that all fizzles away. There may be, a very, very small percentage of companies that can sort of find that fad and get acquired really quickly. But for the most part, I see, hundreds of startups being created that are trying to do really good things, and attracting users and doing it for the benefit of the experience and not just trying to sort of game the system. So I would say it's unfair to sort of qualify those like few fads as being the trend of what people are trying to do.
I think that's right, and I think I don't know Kevin Systrom, but from a distance, it certainly doesn't look like he founded Instagram to flip it. I don't know Mark Zuckerberg. I think he knows exactly what he was doing when he bought Instagram and paid that price. And
well, it was a defensive move as it addressed mobile, which is one of their weaknesses. So, and he used not an inflated stock. I mean, whom some would consider to be an inflated stock to overpay in the eyes of some. So it's sort of like
at the end of the day, I mean, Instagram was just the best experience on mobile for taking pictures, right?
And it was 1% of his company's value. It was a smart move.
They nailed it, right? That was their mission, and they got paid as a result of it. They weren't trying to sort of game the Google algorithm. They nailed the user experience. I think that may not be an example of that. I think there are situations that I've seen, link shorteners and other stuff, that all of a sudden come out of the gates and they're playing off of something, usually another platform, but that corrects itself usually pretty quickly.
It does, and don't focus. I want everybody to hear what Jason said about the Googles and the Facebooks get it right. So, we had this whole burst of content farms, and then Google came out with the Pando release of the search algorithm, and those guys, what I understand is a lot of them have never recovered with the traffic because Google is smarter than they are about at least about its own algorithms. And you may well see something similar happen with EdgeRank. Facebook may make a change. If Facebook thinks that there are companies polluting the timeline or abusing the timeline, I'm certain Facebook will make a change to EdgeRank to tamp it down or correct it or whatever. So, the owners of these platforms are, jealously guard them, and there are always going to be a few outliers in terms of people outside that ecosystem who try to take advantage of some, quirk in the system. I think it's unfortunate, but we are humans, and there's a whole variety of people in the human condition. I agree with Jason. I think mostly what you're seeing is great companies that are authentically attempting to build something awesome for users. Whether they will all succeed at that or not is a whole other issue related to how good they are at what they're attempting. But at least their hearts are in the right place, I think, for the vast majority of cases.
So this being a panel on OTT, I want to bring it back closer to OTT. We've talked about these companies, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and their impact on the space as television and video, online video converges. What are some of the OTT companies that you think stand out? Because there's all these hardware makers, and there's all these companies that have basically raised the boatload. Some of them basically have already shut down or been acquired for nothing. Sesame, I think, raised something like $70 million, and they didn't have a very successful outcome. Boxy was riding a lot of hype a few years ago. They're around, but who knows if they will deliver on that hype. Are there any companies that you think are nailing it or going to have a very good outcome in the years to come?
The other one that I see is nailing it right now is Netflix. But I think others will come and will present sort of applications that really take advantage of the medium. Netflix being sort of the platform on one of these devices. I mean, I think it's a wide open, chaotic market right now between Boxy and Roku and Google TV and pending Apple TV possibly and Samsung and LG's platform and Yahoo's still out there with their widget platform. It's crazy right now. I don't think anyone's quite nailed it. I think Google's platform looks really good, and I think they're continuing to build on it. Their next or their version that's coming, I think, is going to be the best yet. But they haven't nailed it yet either, proven by sort of the user. So a lot needs to happen. I think things will sort of consolidate, as I said earlier, into sort of possibly 3 or 4 platforms, like in mobile. But right now, I think it feels like it's not even the first inning, right? It's preseason warm-ups.
There's not a lot of differentiation, really, from a content perspective in terms of what's offered. I mean, it's basically Hulu Plus might give you access to some of the more, closer to first-run shows, but more or less Netflix and many of the others are just, catalogs, big catalogs of second-run movies and catalogs of old Mad Men episodes, et cetera. So it makes you think, though, from a differentiation perspective, it hasn't happened yet, but could be that the cable companies, again, might be in the best position to provide the most differentiated experience because they'll provide also access to the event viewing shows, so sports, award shows, news programs, et cetera, and not let Netflix and others get that stuff from an over-the-top perspective.
It's 4:40, so we're going to take the next 20 minutes. We're going to do 10 minutes of lightning round. So I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions. They're either multiple choice or either true or false. They're either just yes or no. You have to answer pretty short. Doesn't need to be a word, but you get the idea. And then when we're done, we're going to open up. How many people have questions, just so we can manage the clock? Okay, so a couple questions. Okay, so let's get started. YouTube is spending $100 million at least on content, and they're spending $200 million promoting that content to try to basically convince Madison Avenue to open up the wallets and spend the big brand dollars on YouTube. Is that wishful thinking in that the audience on YouTube doesn't care about that? They still care about the dogs and the crazy personalities? Or is that actually going to be a success and they will get the audiences to watch and they will get the brand marketers to open up their wallets? Justin?
Wishful thinking. First and foremost, because YouTube is a search engine for video first. And that's what people use it for. It's the number 2 search engine on the web. To the extent that they can leverage that portal to promote content, there's potential, but I think it's wishful.
Jason?
I think yes, they will. And I think it won't compete with sort of the scale of what you can see on TV, but because of just their huge number of users, they will be able to blow away anyone else on the online video side with professional content. So they'll be the biggest from that perspective. They won't be able to reach the TV side.
Big success. I think the model of search is instructive. Many things you search on Google come back with no ad. Doesn't matter, as long as you search enough things that they can sell an ad against. So all the ridiculous crazy cat videos in the world, happy to do that because we can't, using the search metaphor, you won't come search for anything if 20% of your search terms get no result because I can't monetize them. So don't be distracted by the non-monetizable video on YouTube. YouTube will be a big success, and the owned content, I think, will be a big. Although they're not going to be Comcast, I agree with Jason. I think it'll be a success.
You mentioned search. So the next question is, are we going to see, let's say in 10 years or even 15 years, are we going to see online video, which right now is like 5% of the total pie, be bigger than search revenue, which is 40% of the pie? So will online video ever generate more ad revenue than search will online? Justin?
Ever?
Not 50 years from now, 10, 15 years. It's not a question for my daughters. I want to know this in my lifetime.
Yeah, I really want to believe that, being in the business. And I'd like to see marketers leverage the online medium from a video perspective in a way that they haven't to this point. At least the advertising that we experience and that you see most prevalent on online video is just repurposed television advertising. It doesn't leverage the interactivity, the targetability of the medium the way that it could. So if it does that, then yes, then I think it will.
Yeah, I'll say unequivocally yes. And I think it'll probably come with a redefinition of what you're calling online video to be digital video.
I don't know.
That's not an option. You can't go to the next page. Try again.
I think the one substantive thing that sort of leans in the other direction is the intent associated with search, which, there's this. The advertiser wants to catch you when you have intent. On the other hand, if you don't know who that person is in that search ad, at the moment you get the search ad, what's the point? So I'm not quite sure how that plays out. I'd like to believe, though, that online video, since I'm in that sector, is 50 times bigger than search.
As of right now, television advertising is twice as big as online advertising. So in 10, 15 years, not 50 years, is online going to really surpass TV advertising?
Yes.
10 to 15, yes.
Yes.
Okay. It's been said that what cable was to broadcast, the web is to cable. Do you agree or disagree, and do you see any nuances to that?
I agree. It's a matter of degree. There's clearly some clearly some changes happening in the marketplace. marketplace that are being forced upon it that would otherwise they would resist. So from that perspective, I think the analogy holds.
I don't. I think it doesn't hold only because cable and broadcast, we're still on the same device, right? I think that when you throw in a different device, it changes everything dramatically. I think there is some similarity in the sense that it's aggregation of lesser known content. At least that's the way cable was initially. But I think it's so different because it's a shift in devices versus just a different piece of content on the same device.
Sorry, that's actually very interesting because the conventional wisdom right now is that, of course, it's the same thing. That's like the hip cliche thing to say, but you're right. Just the form factor is very different. So
yeah, I mean, I've used that line.
Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't work.
It's very unhypocritical of you to admit that you're somewhat of a hypocrite. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I actually agree with the metaphor. If you look at the broadcast era from 1960 to 1980, the average number of television channels received in an American household didn't quite double in those 20 years, from under 6 to just over 10. The cable era from 1980 to 2000, that number grew by a factor of 7. Yeah, 7, from just over 10 to mid-70s. And I think in the sort of internet era, not the web, but the internet era, that number grows from 2000 to 2020, that number will grow from the 70s to essentially nearly infinite. When a video channel is broadcast, or a broadcaster, or a show, or a topic or interest that you care about, or a personality you're following, or an event that's happening right now, it just totally deconstructs what we have thought of as television and re-establishes it in our minds as a video stream that I'm interested in right now. And I think, building on Jason's comment, when you add the other media types that can now come along with it and the interactivity that can come along with it as it synchronizes with other devices and or moves off of those devices entirely, that just becomes sort of on steroids. The business models will change. What drives user behavior will change, just like we saw it change from between 60 and 80 and 80 and 2000. All that stuff will change, but I think the metaphor is a very good metaphor because it clearly supports what we all, I think, know to be true, which is that there's a tremendous amount of chaos, and in that chaos there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for good operators, good innovators, people who can think just a little farther ahead.
Are we ever going to see a point in the next 10 years that the content you find on television is going to mirror exactly what you find either on a tablet or your mobile device?
Yes.
Within 10 years?
Within 10 years.
Within 5?
No.
I'd say yes.
10 or 5?
Yes, within 5, and probably powered by the cable companies within 5.
Right.
I think, the self-serving comment is Frequency does that, like starting in 3 weeks with Samsung, but we'll skip that one.
Strike that from the record, please. I'm kidding. Penalty box, 2 minutes.
I think everything is going to be everywhere really soon, if that was your question.
Right now, it's all about taking a TV ad spot and putting it as a pre-roll and blasting that across the web, which I'll give you, Tremor, a shout-out. That's what makes Tremor so massive. But is there a time when branded entertainment is going, so product placement, product integration, branded entertainment, branded content, is going to be material? Because right now, it's the big pie in the sky. Everybody talks about it, but it still doesn't really make a dent in the ecosystem.
I'm skeptical on that front. I would like not to be, because that would be yet another innovative means for creating brand reach and generating revenue. I'm skeptical on that front.
I think it'll be much bigger than what is now, and maybe not sort of purely for the reason that advertisers want it to be big, but I think it'll be driven by need, because I think DVR ad skipping will become much more prevalent, and it'll be sort of the way that you can grab a user's attention that may not exist in 5 or 10 years.
I am completely not skeptical. I think it's going to be a very, very important aspect of consumers' video lives in the not-too-distant future. And I see no reason that Nike shouldn't be a video channel that is composed of the athletes that represent Nike and the products that people buy from Nike and allows Nike to communicate that we're not abusing our workers in Asia, or at least make their position on that known. I think, and that's just one sort of little example, I think any brand that aspires to occupy a significant position in the hearts and minds of a significant percentage of its customers is going to want to talk directly to them in the most engaging media type ever. And Sight, Sound, and Motion is the way that they're going to do that. And the internet is going to make it possible for them to intersect with their users and customers rather than intercept them on their way to other places. And I think that is an irresistible opportunity for astute brands.
I agree that is powerful. I also agree that the opportunity that compels you to explore because of time shifting. You're not going to be able to reach people if everybody's time shifting. It's more the forced marriage between great storytelling, like we were talking about before, and integration of the advertising message that's where I'm skeptical that can actually be a synergistic relationship.
Yeah, not to cheat on the rules of lightning round, but I'll add, I think there's a really creative guy that says, hey, I got this big idea for this really amazing story that's going to move people and it'll be great. And then everybody's like, yeah, that's amazing. He goes up the chain of command. The CFO gets it. He's like, why the hell are we spending this money? Where's our brand? And then he kills it, or he brings it back down, and it's basically an ad. And then you're like, well, nobody's going to care about that. I see that as the bigger issue. You mentioned the cable companies driving a lot of this one content on all screens. Do you think that the bigger driver is the greed of how much money these companies can make online, or is it the fear of, holy moly, I hope we don't get disrupted if we're not there? So what's driving this? Is it going to be greed or fear?
Both.
No, one answer. Did you not read the rules?
Greed trumps fear.
Greed trumps fear.
Greed.
I think they all genuinely want the best for all of us.
Violin music and birds chirping. Okay.
Having said that, I'd go with greed among your two choices.
Okay, the next two are the last two, and I want one answer. What's more important, content or distribution?
Distribution.
Distribution.
I should have introduced a time limit. One word, let's go. We have one more.
I'll go with content.
Content. And what's more important nowadays? The content, or basically targeting by content, or targeting by audience?
Targeting by audience.
Now it's targeting by content. In the future, it may be targeting by audience.
Interesting
for
when you consider your previous answer, but that's a different discussion.
I think speaking directly to individual people.
All right, questions, and then I might have one last question to close it off. Go.
So, going back to what you said earlier about the TV experience right now is just turn it on and see what's on right now. Don't want to search for something. Do you guys see any growth in the linear OTT channels? Wealth TV, turn it on, it's a 24-hour channel on OTT. They have VOD options, but literally they have 24-hour programming. Do you see any more growth in those? And you pay, I don't know, the a la carte model that everybody's been saying cable needs to, cable operators need to go to, but they're never going to.
Personally, I think until you get a la carte options with like the super premium gold platinum like ESPN options, it doesn't matter. I'm not talking about Wealth TV at all when I say this, but having a fringe, again, not them, I've never even heard of them, so they might be very good, but having a fringe producer, like I could have the 24-hour Watch Mojo, it doesn't mean ESPN's going to lose sleep about it. So I think until you see ESPN, until you see HBO say, you could just get this, you don't have to get all the riffraff, it's not really, it's not even a trend. It's somebody experimenting, and it's great. But so that's my 2 cents.
The threat that video on demand viewing over the top generally presents, the greatest risk are channels like Wealth TV, who are on that tier 2, tier 3. What will likely eventually happen is you have that lost generation who will not get cable. Cable subscriber counts will decline, and ultimately, some of those channels that are on the fringe will not be renewed. And they'll have to do that because the subscribership won't justify the cable bill. So eventually that's what will happen.
Yeah, I think there is a future there within niche, and I think the future probably revolves around content that is best viewed live. And I think Wealth TV may fit that category, but live I think is what would drive that. something can be as sort of equally enjoyed on sort of time shifted basis, then it will be.
I think it's possible, but it awaits the great disruptor or disruptors. It awaits the creative and production team that can take $1,000 digital cameras and a bunch of great creative kids in Brooklyn and create Vice or something like that, and stream that 24/7. Because then you could do it. Here's why I say that. The channel you mentioned, was it Wealth or Well? Well. I'm not familiar with it. But if they're charging a fee for it, then what they're basically saying is it's everything the same as what you have, except I need you to get it differently. Where there's where I think there will be a tremendous opportunity is when somebody says, it's free, it's all ad supported. And it's just as good, or it's good enough, the innovator's dilemma definition of good enough. And then the people who are living in their boxy, Roku-driven world and who are determined to honor that but don't have many options will start adopting that stuff. And the snowball starts. I think as long as I'm just like a cable channel, and I charge you like a cable channel, but I'm a la carte and you have to connect it to your internet. I think that's going to be hard to see that grow.
Any other questions? Okay, one last question, and then I believe it's cocktail hour, which means everybody's going to jet. So 2012, clearly the story of the year, like CES and every conference you go to, is OTT. That's the big hype. Everybody talks about OTT getting, the attention in the living room entertainment. I'm not going to ask you if that's going to turn out to be a valid theme, because it's halfway through the year, not even. But what do you think is going to be the theme in 2013?
Time travel.
Justin?
I love time travel. That's a tough one. I tell you what I want it to be. I want it to be the growth of online video and the embracing of the potential of the medium from a targetability and interactivity perspective. That tipping point happens from TV to online.
The runner-up to time travel, Jason.
Synchronous second screen applications.
I think that'll be the theme in 2013, and so the bonus round is the theme in 2014. I think the theme in 2014 will be the dawning realization that defining video experiences by carriage methodology, broadcast, cable, web, which is how this whole conversation for an hour has been structured. It will dawn on people that is completely invalid in a world driven by tablets and smartphones that don't know from OTT. They are always connected everywhere you go, and increasingly, the first screen in the lives of consumers globally. Already the first screen in the lives of most consumers in Asia, and increasingly the first screen in the lives of consumers globally. And as that realization sinks in, everything changes.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point to close off, because you're right. We keep calling this the second screen, but I'm practically married to this thing. It's with me all the time, and that sounds very bad, but shouldn't. But okay, any last questions? Thank you very much.